I first started paddleboarding, I made a lot of mistakes, and I mean a lot. I used a paddle that was too short, had terrible posture, and of course I fell a ton. All this led to me having a rough start to paddleboarding and many frustrating paddle sessions. So today I want to share with you 5 beginner tips that I wish I knew when I first started paddleboarding in order to help you avoid making the same mistakes that I made. This video is brought to you by Waterspeed. One of the most common mistakes that beginner paddlers make, and that I also made when I was a beginner paddler, is actually using a paddle shaft that is too short. For many beginner paddlers are using an adjustable paddle shaft, and they either forget to adjust it when they go out for a paddle session, or when they adjust it when they're on the shore, they actually have it set to too short of a paddle height. Many times it's at their personal height level, or it's even adjusted lower than that. The reason why having your paddle shaft set to this height is not a good thing is because the time you get on your paddleboard on the water and fully bury your blade all the way down into the water, the top of your paddle shaft is now towards your gut. When you paddle with your paddle shaft at a lower height like that, it actually causes you to have worse paddling posture because it's causing your body to arch more over in an awkward position, as well as it causes you to have to use more of your arm muscles to pull yourself to your paddle shaft with each paddle stroke, versus using your whole body to actually lean forward on that paddle shaft with each paddle stroke, pulling yourself to it and propelling yourself forward in the water. So with those factors in mind, it also affects how well you balance on your paddleboard. If your posture is worse like it is when you have too short a paddle shaft, it is a much harder time to try to balance on your paddleboard versus using a correct paddle height, which will actually make it easier to have better posture and better balance on your paddleboard. So for a beginner paddler, I definitely recommend you use a taller paddle shaft height, roughly to where your arm is almost straight but still has some nice flex in it in your elbow. By using a taller paddle as a beginner, it will allow you to focus more on your paddling form, have better paddle posture, which all in return will give you better balance. One of the biggest learning curves and challenges when it comes to learning how to stand up paddleboard is simply how to have good balance. Most people have not spent a lot of time training their balance muscles or even standing on an unstable surface such as a paddleboard. So just like me, when I started stand-up paddleboarding, you may find it quite challenging simply trying to balance on your paddleboard for the first time. With that being said, one of the biggest mistakes that beginners make is actually pulling their paddle blade out of the water simply out of reaction when they're trying to balance on their paddleboard, which eventually still leads to them falling straight into the water. What they don't realize is that they can actually use their paddle blade to help them have better balance while on their paddleboard. For example, if it feels like you're starting to fall to the right side of your paddleboard, you can actually put your paddle blade on that side of your paddleboard and lean onto it to help you push yourself back up again to have better balance once again. And the same thing goes for the other side of your paddleboard. So you put your paddle blade on that side that you feel wobbly on, lean on your paddle blade to push yourself back up again to restabilize yourself on your paddleboard. Real quick before we dive into our next tip, I simply want to give a huge thank you to Waterspeed for sponsoring today's video. Waterspeed is a revolutionary app created by water sports enthusiasts for water sports enthusiasts. Designed to track your sessions, analyze your performance, and see how you're progressing, no matter what your favorite water sport is. I personally enjoy using their app to record all of my paddle sessions and love the detailed information they provide me both during and after my paddleboard workouts. One of my favorite features is using their map to go back through my workout and re-watch it to see what my stats were during each moment of my paddleboard session and where I was performing my best at. You can use this app with your phone, your Apple Watch, or even your Garmin watch, which will automatically send your workout info to your Waterspeed account. So whether you're a beginner paddler or an expert paddler, I definitely recommend you check out waterspeedapp.com and download their app today. So if you're like me when I first started paddleboarding, you may find it extremely challenging simply trying to paddle in a straight line. When you go for a paddle session, it seems like you're doing everything right, but for some reason you're drifting right and then left and then right again and then left again. You just can't seem to go straight towards where you want to go. Now, although there are a ton of factors that do affect with how straight you do paddle on the water, the biggest one being your form and technique, one of the other major factors that's affecting you that's causing you to go right and left so much when you're paddling on the water is actually keeping your paddle blade too far out to the side of your paddleboard when you're paddling in the water. When you have your paddle blade too far out to the side of your paddle board when you're paddling in the water, for example, if it's too far out to the right side of your paddle board, it's actually causing it to push you more to your left with each paddle stroke that you're making. And same thing on the other side of your paddle board, if it's too far to the left side, it's going to cause you to push more to the right as you're paddling along. To help fix this, you simply need to bring that paddle blade closer to the side of your paddle board. And as you go with each paddle stroke, keep that paddle blade close to the rail side of your paddle board as you're paddling along. The reason this is more effective at helping you paddle straighter is if you can imagine a line going down the center part of your paddleboard towards where you want to go, and if you could paddle directly on that center line every single stroke, you would also be paddling pretty straight as you go forward in the water. But since you obviously cannot paddle directly on that center line, since there's definitely obviously a paddleboard in the way, the next best thing you can do is simply keep your paddle blade on the side of your paddleboard as close as possible to that center line, help you paddle straighter in the water. Now this next tip may seem like an obvious one, but for many times for beginner paddlers, due to excitement or due to nerves, they tend to stand actually in the wrong spot on their paddleboard, which makes it harder for them to balance and harder for them to paddle in the water overall in general for their first time. If you stand too far back on your paddleboard, it actually causes the nose of your board to lift more out of the water, which basically means you have less board in the water, which causes you to have worse glide, making you have to work harder for each paddle stroke in order to keep up a higher speed or to travel farther with each paddle stroke as you're paddling on the water. Likewise, you're standing too far forward on your paddleboard, the back of your board starts to lift more out of the water, and the nose of your board starts to dive more as well as you're paddling along, causing you to have more drag and once again, worse glide. Also, in both those scenarios, since you're standing on a more narrow part of the paddleboard, you'll find it much harder to balance as well on your paddleboard. With that being said, the best place for you to stand on your paddleboard is actually in the center location of the board. The best way to know where your most central part of your paddleboard is simply to look for your carrying handle on your paddleboard, and that'll be a perfect location to use as a reference point to know that's the exact center part of your paddleboard. It's also the most widest part of your paddleboard as well, giving you more stability and better balance as you try to stand on your paddleboard. This last tip that I have for you today is something that's going to greatly help you when it comes to your balance. For many beginner paddlers, they will tend to stand on their paddleboard with straight, stiff legs, or they'll keep their legs bent, but at the same time too, they're still stiff and not moving at all. By keeping your legs stiff like that, it actually makes it harder for you to try to balance on your paddleboard, because as the paddleboard moves on the surface of the water and your legs are stiff, therefore your whole body will move with that paddleboard, swaying side to side, making it harder for you to try to balance on your board. In order to help fix this, simply stand in a ski boot stance on your paddleboard with relaxed knees. That way, as the board moves on the surface of the water and even tilts side to side, your knees can then flex with the movement of that water on the board below you, keeping your upper body stable and under control. If you've enjoyed today's video, I highly encourage you to check out my Ultimate Beginner Paddleboard course video, also available on my YouTube channel. That video is way more in depth, and I give you a full entire breakdown and walkthrough of how to go from getting on your paddleboard to standing up and having a better experience on the water as a beginner paddler. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, watch another video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.